Shortly after my son was born, my then husband and I bought a 100-year-old house to accommodate our growing family. It was a charming old place, perfect for the three of us, and our medium-large dog. However, as someone who grew up terrified of the dark, thanks to an unsettling childhood incident involving a neighbor boy peering through my window, the house's creaks and groans were not comforting. I told myself the noises were normal, just the sounds of an old house with ancient trees brushing against the roof and windows, a clanking back gate that refused to stay shut, and the groans of old radiant heat. Still, every bump in the night sent me diving under the covers like a reasonable adult. When my then husband and I divorced, I kept the house while he kept the dog. Alone with my young son, the house's eerie quirks seemed to magnify. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, my son and I were watching a movie in the front room when my phone died. As a typically disorganized Type B personality, I went on a treasure hunt to find my lone phone charger, eventually discovering it in the kitchen. But as I crossed the room to plug in my phone, a wave of goosebumps and dread washed over me. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. Turning to the window, I froze. The back gate, which I had closed earlier, was wide open. Worse, a figure sat cross-legged in the yard, staring at the house. The person wore a hood and dark sunglasses, even though the daylight was nearly gone. They didn't move, not even when I stepped closer to the window, convinced I was imagining things. Their eerie stillness continued, even as it became clear they could see me seeing them. Heart pounding, I locked the back door, grabbed my phone and charger, and hurried to my laptop. I sent a frantic message to the first friend I saw online. "Someone's in my yard staring at my house. My phone's dead. Please call the police if you don't hear from me soon." I assumed the figure would leave once they realized they'd been spotted, but they didn't. Minutes crawled by as I sat, staring anxiously at my lifeless phone. My son, confused, asked why we weren't going to the kitchen for water. I mumbled an excuse, wishing my phone would hurry up and charge. When it finally powered on, I called 911 and explained the situation to the dispatcher. I told her the person in the yard was likely gone, but asked if an officer could check. She stayed on the line and asked me to discreetly look out a window and confirm if the figure was still there. I crept toward the kitchen, heart thundering, and crouched to peek out the window. The back door was locked, but then I saw it, the dog door. It was far too large and I had no way to block it. As the realization hit me, I stood slightly to scan the yard. My breath caught in my throat. The hooded figure, with those same dark sunglasses, was now standing at the window staring down at me. Panic surged as I stammered into the phone. The dispatcher told me to grab my son and get to a locked room. I sprinted to him, trying to stay calm, and told him we needed to go. Just as I picked him up, I heard it, the slow, deliberate sound of the dog door swinging open. Gripping my son tightly, I bolted. We ran out the front door, leaving it wide open, and dashed across the street to a neighbor's house. Breathless and shaking, I pounded on their door. They kindly let us in, interrupting their dinner party to distract my son while I sobbed and rambled about the indoor cat I had left behind. Police arrived minutes later. From my neighbor's window, I watched as they entered the yard and emerged with the hooded figure in tow. She had been sitting calmly on my back step, her arm lazily swinging in and out of the dog door. That night, I boarded up the dog door for good, but the house never felt the same after that. Every creak, knock, and thump seemed sinister. Within a few months, my son and I moved. I couldn't shake the suspicion that all those normal sounds I had dismissed before might not have been the house after all. Back in the late 2000s, I was in my early 20s, living as a broke but happy expat in Berlin. One night, after a fun evening at a live band show, my roommate, a practical Brit, and I were heading home. It was late, around midnight or 1 a.m., and the city was quiet. The air was misty, the streetlights cast soft yellow halos, and a light breeze scattered fallen leaves across the pavement. We were arm in arm, laughing and chatting, slightly tipsy but not drunk, as we approached a long, empty street leading to the subway station. In the distance, through the mist, we spotted a figure walking ahead of us. It appeared to be an older woman, hunched over, carrying heavy bags in each hand and dragging one leg as she limped along. We were speaking English as we neared her, planning to pass by, when she suddenly cried out in a thick German accent, "Oh, help! Won't somebody help me?" Her tone wasn't frightened or desperate. It was oddly commanding, almost theatrical. My roommate muttered for us to keep moving, but something in me, my instinct to help, perhaps, made me slow down. After all, she looked frail, struggling with her bags late at night. I asked what she needed, and she gestured toward an apartment building a little way up the street. "It's my leg. Help me carry the bags. I live just over there." Without hesitation, I said, "Of course we'll help you." My roommate hesitated but reluctantly joined me. Each of us grabbed one of her bags and began walking toward the building. As we got closer, the woman stepped under a streetlight, and I caught a clear look at her face. She looked like something out of a grim fairy tale. Hunched posture, straggly gray-white hair, a wart on her crooked nose, and dark woolen clothes with a hood. I nearly gasped, but quickly dismissed my reaction. She's just an elderly woman, I thought. When we reached the apartment building, the door was already ajar, which was unusual for the area. She pushed it open with surprising strength and gestured toward a dark staircase. "Just up the stairs, just up the stairs," she murmured. I froze in the doorway. The dim hallway light flickered, casting eerie shadows up the narrow staircase. A stale, smoky odor wafted down, and my stomach churned with unease. Something about her tone, it was sharp, insistent, almost gleeful, sent shivers down my spine. Logically, I thought I should help her carry the bag upstairs, but every instinct in me screamed otherwise. My roommate must have felt it too, because she suddenly yelled, "Oh, hell no!" and grabbed my arm, yanking me out of the doorway. The woman shouted after us as we hurried down the street, her voice dripping with disappointment. We didn't stop until we were safely inside the brightly lit subway station, surrounded by other people. Once we caught our breath, my roommate explained what had unsettled her. First, she swore the woman's limp was fake. It only appeared as we got closer. Second, she had an overwhelming certainty that someone was waiting for us upstairs, possibly to harm us. "I just knew there was a creepy adult son up there ready to chain you to her bed," she said bluntly. Maybe it was all in our imaginations, but I'm forever grateful for my roommate's instincts. That night could have ended very differently if we'd ignored the strange vibes. Call to action. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Politeness is never worth risking your safety. Always stay alert, and don't hesitate to walk away from a situation that feels wrong. You never know. It could save your life. This was a decade ago now, at a very difficult time in my life. I had moved to Northern California from the Pacific Northwest for grad school, living in a shitty studio provided by the school with too much stuff in it. No real chance to make friends yet. Unemployed for the first time in my adult life, living off what I could scrounge from odd jobs. I had acute PTSD that I believed at that time was going to kill me. I had been suicidal for years before this, and that made it worse. On the afternoon this happened, I was laying in my bed on my side, facing away from the wall, with the one window above my head. California sunshine, sounds of campus outside. I was drifting in and out of a nap when the previously warm and brightly lit room went cool, silent, and dark. Weird, but maybe a lull in traffic, a cloud over the late afternoon sun. But soon I felt more, then saw a black shadow behind me. Almost as soon as I sensed the being, I don't know what else to call it, I felt it try to enter me and felt the most pain I've ever experienced. This wasn't sexual at all. Instead, it felt like the black shadow was trying to float into my body, to possess it, or just to satisfy its curiosity. I have no idea. But it hurt so badly, like every cell on my body was on fire. I didn't dare turn around. I didn't think I could face what I'd see, and I didn't know anything else I could do to stop it. Because it felt imperative to stop it. My whole body was screaming. I could even feel my face form a scream, but nothing came out. The only thing I could think of to do was to just tighten every bone, muscle, tendon, cell in my body and try to force it out, or at least stop its progress. So that's what I did. And it kind of worked. At least that pushing through feeling stopped for a second. It started up again and I tightened even further, my body in so much pain from the intrusion that the tightening was almost a relief. And it stopped again. I became aware that I had a sense of a silent emotional response from the being as I relaxed a bit, and it attempted to intrude once more, but more tentatively this time. I tightened once again, and I felt this sense of confusion from the being as they withdrew their hand, body, from mine. They were genuinely confused and somewhat concerned about why I was doing this, why I wasn't allowing them in. Something wasn't going according to what they had planned or expected. I saw a shadowy part of them pass over me out of the corner of my eye. They seemed to be moving over my body, checking it out. I could feel their presence above my skin and get a sense of the size of them. They were just this cloud of black, darker in some parts, but almost see-through in others. They tried one last time, just a tendril, but I knew what worked at this point and tightened again, and the being withdrew their tendril and disappeared. The room was suddenly light again. I could hear sound outside just like before, but I still didn't dare move for quite some time after, terrified it would come back. It never did, but I still didn't sleep for weeks. I still struggled to lay down for a nap. What if it comes back? I don't know what it was or what it wanted. I spent many of those sleepless nights searching online but got nowhere. It's honestly hard to get good results when you Google dark shadowy thing tried to enter me alien ghost, as it turns out. It seemed like most people would think it was sleep paralysis or hypnagogic hallucinations, but I've read about all of those, and it doesn't fit what I felt. I could move enough to tighten, I could feel my face make expressions, I could move my eyes, and I could feel it. Feel its emotions, which felt very simple, with no malice at all, like it didn't want to hurt me, and it was really puzzled that it realized or suspected it had. It seemed like the being expected me to be asleep or, and this is what it really felt like, dead. I don't know if one of my suicide attempts that year wasn't supposed to have been survived and I got on some sort of list, but got spared somehow. Or maybe someone a few apartments over was a few minutes late to their final exit because their ride was delayed by me. Or if it was an alien of some kind. It definitely did not feel human in any way. I truly hope I'll never meet it again, until it's my time to go, but I honestly wish it well. It scared the absolute crap out of me, but I really don't think it meant to. Its actions, whatever they were meant to do, felt remarkably simple and neutral, like it was just doing a job and corrected its mistake when it realized it. The job was just possession. 4 years ago, my husband and I took an anniversary trip to the Upper Peninsula in Michigan. It was early-ish pandemic days, and the opportunity to be free of the tornado of constant homework, parenting a toddler, was as great as the lakes we'd hoped to explore. We split the trip into 2 parts, one part outdoorsy, one part relaxation. We started out kayak camping on Lake Superior, just off Pictured Rock's National Lakeshore. We had a remote campsite out on Grand Island that we would paddle to in our sport-level inflatable kayak, carrying all our food and gear for 2 nights. The paddle to the campsite had been challenging but doable. We were medium-level kayakers, so after about 3 hours of travel with some poking around the island mixed in, we were very ready to settle in. The campsite itself was stunning. It faced a large bay that then opened out onto Lake Superior, beautifully framing the horizon in a way that felt almost fake. Off in the distance, you could barely make out the edge of Pictured Rocks. The wolves howled and laughed throughout the night as we sat around the fire. The woods around us lit only by glow lichen. After a beautiful first night, we woke up with the shining sun to enjoy the view, shake off the boxed wine hangover, and drink coffee before heading out to adventure. We made a loose plan to kayak towards Pictured Rocks, which involved a short open water crossing that was potentially treacherous, but worth it to get to where we wanted to go. To our surprise, we nailed the open water crossing in a little over an hour. It was challenging, but the famous Lake Superior waves proved manageable, and our arms withstood the power of the current. We spent the rest of the day poking along the coastline, taking in the breathtaking rock formations and arches, soaking up the sunshine, and stopping at various beaches for exploration and snacks. At around 3 p.m., we decided to head back to the campsite to get settled in for the evening. As we stood on the beach plotting our way back, we noticed that the rental kayak bros were busy hauling all the kayaks up to a shelter. We figured since it was late September, they were likely closing early due to a light end-of-season day. The tourists had also slowly trickled away, and we were left mostly alone. There were two options for heading back. The first was to go back the way we came along the coastline, and then repeating the same open water crossing we had done that morning. This would also take us against the current, meaning we'd be working a lot harder and adding time when we didn't necessarily have the daylight to spare. The second option was to take a straight line through a much larger open water crossing back to the island, which we could see plain as day ahead of us. It would be a much shorter and direct route. In our eagerness to get back to camp and still feeling ourselves over how well we'd been doing, we chose option 2. We started out and were feeling strong as we paddled along. The waves were picking up a bit, but that was to be expected once we got to the open water. We took a quick break and finished up the last of our snacks, confident that we would be back to camp in an hour or two to refuel our bodies. We'd been at it for probably an hour and the weather was turning. The sun disappeared, and the clouds began to spit rain. Or was that mist from the waves that were gradually splashing higher and higher around us? The wind had picked up to a steady clip right into our faces. The water was cold. I can't pinpoint exactly when I realized we weren't moving forward anymore, but I remember looking over at the rocky coastline far to my left and realizing the particular rock that I'd been tracking for a while had not moved even a little. It was still in the same spot it had been the last time I looked at it, and the time before. We were silent, neither of our stubborn asses ready to admit that we may have gotten in way over our heads. We plowed on. Another hour passed. Or was it 2? The minutes really did turn into hours as we kept paddling and paddling forward and getting seemingly nowhere. I was positioned in the front of the kayak, trying to keep us moving as much as I could, but the wind had other ideas. I scanned every direction, and there was nowhere to go that would allow for a safe landing. There was a rock wall on one side and thick brush on the other, both options very far in the distance. There was not another boat in sight. My husband pulled out his phone but had absolutely no signal. We kept paddling. My husband was in the back, working his hardest to steer us in a straight line. At one point he shouted to me over the din of wind and spray, "Give me your water bottle." I obliged without question, and turned enough to see him open it up and dump its contents into the lake. "What the fuck are you doing?" I screamed, my survivalist instinct to ration our water having kicked in somewhere along the line. I then saw why he needed it. He was sitting in about 6 inches of water, 60-degree, late-season Lake Superior water. And he'd been in it for what was likely about 2 hours. Or was it? Since he was heavier than me, it had all pooled around his end and I hadn't noticed it. He started to use my empty water bottle to try and bail out the kayak while simultaneously paddling to keep us in a straight line. Unsurprisingly, this did not work. He chose paddling over bailing out, and we continued on. Again, we fell silent as we bore down. We just kept paddling and paddling. The waves got higher and higher, white caps sprawling out in front of us like an obstacle course we had to win in order to get to safety. My arms were absolutely on fire and my back ached from hunching forward. I didn't know how much more I could handle. Resting wasn't an option. Rest meant the wind pushed us back, undoing any forward progress we had worked so hard for. I thought about our son. I thought about our house. I thought about my parents. I thought about my job. It was getting darker by the minute and the waves kept coming. We were amateurs to rough water, so every wave proved a teachable moment. I was now sitting in about 6 inches of water, which meant my husband was getting close to waist deep. My watch had died somewhere around hour 3, but I didn't dare ask for the time. Through either telepathy or just practice after 10+ years of communicating with each other, we each silently decided our only option was forward. We just had to get into the bay that led to our campsite. The water and wind would be calmer there, so we kept going. We occasionally shouted words of encouragement to the other over the howl of the wind, but we were mostly quiet. I thought about how deep the water was. I thought about how stupid we were. I thought about the cozy Airbnb we had booked for the next leg of the trip. I thought about the kayak rental bros packing it in early since it was obvious to them the weather was going to turn, and then I looked up and the island was upon us. I wasn't sure when or how it got there. It was nighttime dark now, and I could see the silhouette of its tree line in the occasional low moonlight that poked through the clouds. We were entering the bay, and we each let out a tentative sigh of relief. When we finally pulled up onto the island, we both rolled out of the kayak and flopped onto the beach. We couldn't move. We finally figured out the time, and it was after 8 p.m. The whole thing had taken over 5 hours. We had made it, but it didn't feel like a victory. We had fucked with Mother Nature, and she had damn well almost won. It wasn't until this moment that we realized we were bordering hypothermic. Each of us were shaking uncontrollably and making little sense as we blabbered to each other and tried to address our many needs. We stripped naked, just right there in the open. We found blankets and mustered a little fire. We ate whatever we could get our hands on and drank water, then boxed wine. And we recapped what turned out to be the dumbest decision we had made in the 11 years we had been a duo. We spent the rest of the night figuring out how to get off the island in the morning. We both had kayak PTSD and had no desire to make the trip back any longer than it needed to be. In the end, we portaged the kayak and all our gear to a broken-down dock on the opposite side of the island to shorten the return trip. When we finally got back to the car on the mainland, I cried. For days after, whenever I sat still, I could feel the waves of Lake Superior tossing me around. And with that phantom up and down, back and forth came that feeling of hopelessness. The feeling that I was powerless against the forces of nature. One does not mess with the big lake they call Gichigumi. We celebrated our next anniversary at a nice hotel here at home. We have not been kayaking together since. This story didn't exist even 3 days ago. I've made a burner account specifically to talk about it since it is still an ongoing investigation. I'm also going to use pseudonyms and keep this story more vague so that it remains anonymous. I just can't stop thinking about it. It's devouring me. I live in a large, wealthy metropolitan area in a newer-built mid-rise condo. The majority of residents skew midlife or older and are uniformly white-collar professionals or retired. That is to say, this is a very nice building in a very nice neighborhood. Monday after work, I got off the elevator and was hit with a smell. I got to my condo and told my spouse Taylor that either somebody had overcooked Brussels sprouts or somebody had died. Taylor ran errands Tuesday and confirmed that it certainly doesn't smell right in the hallway, that's for sure. I don't know what a dead body smells like, and that seems terrifically unlikely, so we go on about our lives. There was a cold, rainy snap this past week, and the smell kind of comes and goes, but it felt like it would be a rude thing to complain about to management. We just ignored it and knew it'd go away like every other burnt meal somebody made. Saturday was sunny and warm. Taylor was doing minor work in our unit, so they are back and forth all morning between our unit and the courtyard on a lower floor. The first time they come back, they say, "That smell is back and it's worse." We both half-jokingly muse about how it's a body. The second time they come back, I hear voices in the hallway when they open our door. Our building is usually very quiet, so I ask if someone is finally having a party. There's a group of neighbors going around to all the units in our hall to see where the smell is coming from. Somebody on the floor below tried to show a unit today, and the smell when they opened their door was so bad they couldn't go in. Do they think it's a body? Yeah, that's the consensus. The third time Taylor comes back, they confirm the unit has been identified and the owner contacted. Riley, an HOA board member, is fetching the set of spare keys for the unit, 3 doors down from ours, smack between us and the elevator. There are more people in the hallway. Then all hell breaks loose. Suddenly the smell is 10x worse and unbearable when Taylor opens our door to the hall. Everyone in the hall is now wearing N95s or covering their faces some other way. Taylor talks to Riley, who just went into the unit and saw enough to confirm the authorities need to be called before they got back out and shut the door. Taylor asked if it was in fact a body. Riley confirms, visibly shaken. We've been smelling corpse odor all week. The body had been rotting there, right in our densely populated building. Every time someone opens that unit door, the smell floods out. Cops have showed up and are asking routine questions to the neighbors. We overhear them say the body was found in a bathtub. that CSI has been called, and they need to search the deceased's car. The smell is so bad I barely make it out of my unit before I run back and have a mild breakdown. Finally, we get out and evacuate the building for the day. I do not want to go back home, so after hours in the city, we return to sit in the courtyard with some neighbors and drink and talk. A few are pulled to be interviewed. The cops want their doorbell camera footage to try and determine when the deceased was last seen alive. We watch as CSI flashbulbs go off from the unit. The police in the building are wearing respirators now. The unit below it has all its windows open to air out. We decide to go to dinner. We leave the building and run smack into the coroner. I badge them in and hold the door for the gurney and body bag, 7 hours after the discovery was made. It would be freaky enough if that was the end. It's not. All the usual questions aside, why did no one notice they were missing for more than a week? Did they not have a job? Family? Friends? Strange details start emerging. The deceased was a one-bedroom renter in our building since it was built 18 years ago, the past 9 years in the unit where they died. According to Corey, who shared a wall with the deceased and who knew them cordially but not enough to know their last name, they were a retired military veteran, and there was hardly any furniture in the unit. Just a single chair in the main room, no table or anything. Riley confirmed this and also told us there was a handwritten note on the refrigerator. In case of emergency, call the VA. Yesterday, a resident ran a background check on the unit and shared it with me. The resident was in their mid-50s, not exactly die of old age to me. They did live in our building all this time, and in a few states before that, back to the early 1990s. But all the known associations are people who live in states far away. In fact, none are even remotely in our area. Their LinkedIn is sparse, though it does show current employment, that we assume is out of date, as Corey believed they were fully retired, and a military history. But there are no interactions, and the contact info links back to the LinkedIn page itself. So what did they do for the last 18 years? Nothing? Met no one? They have no social media we can find. The police don't seem to be doing much better given that they're coming around to us asking the same questions. What's more, our building is undergoing construction, and we currently have a fire marshal on duty 24/7, who periodically makes rounds on all the floors. In all my time here, we have never had 24/7 guards of any kind. And for them to be on duty when there's a death of unknown time and origin strikes me as odd. With more eyes on the place, you'd think they would have seen something. But I guess none of them ever saw him or noticed a smell. But then it got really freaky. On Sunday, a full-on trail of blood showed up leading from the main lobby into the elevator and onto our floor. It surely can't be from the corpse that left the day before. And again, the fire marshal who sits by the door seems to have missed whoever was bleeding all over the place, coming in from outside. Emil complained to the board, and the board told them they don't know what to do about it, except wait for the cleaning staff to do it on Monday. So Emil and Corey clean our floor lobby of the bodily fluids themselves. The police came back yesterday for more interviews. They called the VA to try and determine next of kin and medical history. The VA has no record of this person existing. Then last night, Monday, another trail of blood is found in the elevator and into our top floor lobby. The board president sends a building-wide email asking people to please clean up after themselves, or they will pull the security footage, which is likely already happening given the suspicious death. We are all frazzled and overwhelmed, and the last thing we need is someone free bleeding all over the place while an active investigation is happening. Emil and Corey and I hope this is just a dog in heat and a lazy owner, but then why isn't the blood showing up more than once a day? The unit is still an active crime scene until detectives can determine a time and cause of death. There is still no next of kin to be contacted for the deceased. I don't feel afraid or unsafe, but everything in our hallway feels so open-ended and unresolved right now. Who was this person? I know Occam's razor says they were probably just someone with no friends, who kept to themselves and lived alone and had a heart attack or aneurysm or something sometime last weekend, and didn't have anyone in their life to wonder why they hadn't been heard from in a while. But even if the saddest possibility is the most likely, what is with the in case of emergency note, and the VA having no knowledge or record of them? And it doesn't explain the multiple days of blood in the elevator either. I am really shaken by this whole experience, first from realizing what I was smelling all week, and then realizing how utterly sad it all is. But still, pardon the pun, something stinks to high heaven about it. I don't know who they were before they died. Apparently none of us did. I hope we get some answers soon. But until then, there's just an eerie feeling in our part of the building. I can't stop thinking that except to pay their landlord every month, it's like they never existed at all. My partner and I were watching a friend's old house and his dogs in upstate New York while he was out of the country for work. The house is old, early 1800s, and huge and beautiful, but a bit creepy. But we needed to get out of the city, so we jumped at the cushy gig. We rented a car and we were headed up from the city. Our friend had left earlier that day and the dogs were in the house. I'd been driving most of the way, but my partner took over once I got sleepy. They're driving us on a dark, narrow mountain road in the Catskills. The road on the right side of us is a small ditch that quickly rises back up into the side of a mountain. The road on the left side of us is right on down the mountain, pretty much a straight drop. Our turn is coming up. We're the only car on the road, and have been for almost an hour. My partner puts the turn signal on, and we're turning, and then we suddenly hear this revving engine sound behind us and this sports car, like a 90s Mustang or something, going probably 100 mph, zooms up next to us and swerves to the left to overtake us and make the turn before we do. My partner jerks the wheel to the right at the last second and slammed on the brakes, and we veered off and managed to stop with one tire crooked into a ditch, inches from crashing into the side of the mountain on the right side. The other driver truly almost T-boned the driver's side of our car. We would have gone straight into the side of the mountain. While we're catching our breath, police lights and sirens screech up behind us and past us, chasing after the driver. We sat there in the car for a few minutes just staring and breathing, talking each other down from how close we'd been to a fatal accident. We had both felt the rush of wind speed coming off that car, what would have been the impact force of it hitting us. Hate cops, but we hoped the cop would catch them down the road, because we'd never seen or felt someone driving that crazy. After we cooled down, we scooted back onto the road, driving the last few miles towards our friend's house, and as we're going a second cop car flies by, and then a third. We're thinking, holy shit, what is this? We're about a half mile from our friend's house when we see all 3 cop cars have pulled someone over. Great, they got him. But when we approached, we saw it was a giant pickup truck, not the Mustang that had nearly killed us. We slowed down and passed on the left. The driver of the truck looked really freaked out. We're staring at him because we're thinking, how could they mistake a truck for that Mustang? They got the wrong guy. We went a bit further and were approaching our friend's house up the road on the right, and I was looking up the directions our friend sent. Pull halfway into the driveway, get up and open the gate, etc. So we slowed down to open the gate and turn into the driveway. And just as we slowed down to pull in on the other side of the road, parked, we saw the Mustang. It was sitting right in front of our friend's house on the road, with the door open. And there was a person in it. I panicked and barked at my partner to not slow down, to keep driving, because for a second I had this thought, don't let him see you go in this house. But we were already turning into the driveway, and I had to step out of the car and throw the gate open, and I kept telling myself, don't look at him, don't look. But I did, and he was looking right at me from inside the lit car. I can't tell much about what he looked like. White guy, middle age maybe, but his expression, it was this blank stare of determination. Like he couldn't see me fully, but right before I turned away, I thought he gave me a kind of a snarl. I ran through the gate, closed it as soon as my partner drove through, and jumped back in the car. We sped up the driveway, jumped out of the car, fumbled the lockbox and the key open, and ran in the house and started running around turning off lights, checking the doors and closing all the curtains. His dogs are freaking out barking, but they're both little lap dogs, so it wasn't like they were going to protect us. We got all the lights off and each grabbed a dog and huddled by the front window, looking out the side of the curtain. The car was still there, the door still open. We could still see his shape sitting in the lit car across from the bottom of the driveway. And the thing about this gate to the driveway, it doesn't lock. It's just a little wooden country gate with a drop latch. He could easily come up to the house. We watched the light in the car at the bottom of the hill from the window for maybe 2 hours. We kept wondering where the cops were, why they pulled the other guy over when it was clearly this guy who was the psycho. and how long he would sit there across from the house until the light simply shut off. We think? Neither of us was 100% sure, but we kept going over it, and neither one of us saw or heard it drive away. Logic won, though, and we convinced ourselves we must have missed it driving away, and it was just a reckless drunk driver who eventually headed home. We were both exhausted, so we decided to just get the dogs and pile into bed in an upstairs bedroom. We were too freaked out to sleep on the ground floor and try to watch a dumb movie to calm our nerves. The bedroom was in the front of the house, and every once in a while I would see something out of the corner of my eye through the upstairs window and think it was the light in the car coming on again. But when I actually turned to look, there wouldn't be anything, so I'm proud to say we eventually fell asleep to Mighty Ducks 3. We both woke up at the same time a few hours later. It was maybe 4 a.m., and every light in the room was on. And judging from how lit the yard was out the window, every light in the entire house was on. We had turned every light off before we went to sleep because we were terrified of someone seeing in, and there was a sound that at first I thought must be an alarm system. But once I fully woke up, I realized it was a howl, and it was coming from everywhere. It sounded like it was coming from the walls and the floor and the ceiling and bed all at once. The tiny dogs were barking so hard they actually sounded kind of vicious. I just thought, he's here. We had gone to sleep with the only weapons we could find in the house tucked under our pillows. My partner had a dull kitchen knife and I had a hammer. We grabbed them and started to get out of the bed, and then the light started to move. First the 2 ceiling light bulbs and the 2 lamps started passing it around our room, and it went in a circle for about 2 rounds, and then the noise stopped. And the room went completely black. We could see the light in the hallway getting brighter under the door frame. The dogs got confused and stopped barking and slunk away from the door and went under the bed. Then the hallway light went out, and I could see through the window the reflections on the grass outside of other lights in the house flashing on and off. The porch light, the room next to and under us, and then all the lights cut off altogether. This is a house where the porch light is always on, and with emergency floodlights with a generator. This house can go off-grid if need be. This house has a full backup system. But there was nothing on. It was pitch black. Eventually, amid what the fucks and tears and bargaining about who was going to go check the house or flip the breaker switch in the basement, we came close to deciding us both, then finally agreed it was neither. We fell asleep again. The next morning when we woke up, everything was fine. The lights worked. The dogs seemed untraumatized. We were shaky as hell, but the sun was out and it seemed like maybe we just had some great spiritual misunderstanding the night before. We wondered if it was collective hysteria from almost being in a wreck and being stressed from being in the city, and we felt dumb about our kitchen weapons. It was when we went into town to get coffee and groceries that we heard some people talking about a wreck. The night before, the guy in the Mustang had tried to pass the guy in the truck about 100 yards back down the road, where we saw the truck guy pulled over. The Mustang guy had gotten too close to the edge and drove off the mountain and died. Were there 2 Mustangs? Or was it a similar-looking car? Did we imagine it? We had another week and a half in that house, and we slept with all the lights on, the hammer, the dumb knife, and both dogs every single night. I still haven't told my friend. He's back in his house and he loves it, and if someone told me that shit, I would move immediately. Don't forget to like this video to show your support. Comment below with your scariest experiences, if you dare. Subscribe to the channel for more haunting tales every day.